Hello and or hello again.
Hello. How did open hours go? Was that right before
Uh,
this?
yeah, really good. So for probably about 35 minutes of it, it basically asked if you were a new Salt contributor, what was your biggest question? What would you want to most know? And that sparked a really good conversation about what things could be involved in a contributor guide. What are some of those
Ooh,
recurring
maybe we
questions? So it
could
turned really good.
maybe we could capture some of that today and
Uh,
get some action items out of it or something. That sounds really cool.
Absolutely. I definitely have I don't usually take notes live during the open hour, but in this case I did. A lot of it was copy and pasted from the chat, but um, just keeping a list of all that feedback.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good. I wasn't sure how the conversation would go because sometimes people are hesitant to speak up, but once one or two people start talking in the chat, other people do.
I'm gonna keep the camera off because I'm gonna eat lunch during our meeting today. So
I had a question about our documentation that's available to outside people. Um, I know that when I first started, I went through the training and I got like a whole training packet that had a whole bunch of like examples and stuff that kind of built off of each other, like each section. Is that available to everybody, or is that only available to people once they go through the FSC training?
my understanding is that it is only available if you take the course. Um, I could double check with Adam Cannon. I don't even know it like I almost feel like his plan is also to do away with that manual, which I have mixed feelings about. But um yeah, I think it's only available to people who take the course at this point. I noticed they have a big copyright symbol on it and things like that.
Yeah, that's why I didn't bring it up in the open hour because I wasn't sure that I would be allowed to or that I should.
No worries.
Um, but yeah, I would definitely say don't get rid of it. It's really good.
I know, right? I think
It's silly.
like almost let's take that and replace our current manual, with what's in
I
there. It's
mean,
really good.
yeah, that seems like it would be a really good like getting started or here's your first walk through the product doc or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
No, I agree.
it's too good to just not use.
Let me,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
what I was going to say is I think that we talked about, but I don't know if we talked about this with like Adam Cannon, who would be in charge of this, and it's probably an action item we could take in this working group to say, hey, we really like this, but maybe what we need is something that's sort of pared down that we could put into a public view and then say, if you like this example, then take this course. And so then we're promoting what could be done. Sort of like you usually see this in open source projects that it's like, oh, here's kind of an example of something that you can do. And if you want to see like how this scales out, that's going to be in our enterprise product, and be something similar. And I think that that's
Yeah, completely agree with
kind
that.
of, yeah, that's kind of where we've been going with even the collaboration with Adam's group, is that they've done some really great things in the training documentation that we'd love to harness and we'd love to be a part of. And we're just still at that like phase of, hey, we should do that. And so we're just getting started. But yeah, you bring up a really good point. And I think it speaks to some of the stuff that Derek and I were talking about in the open hour and that we do want to do. And I'd be happy to even take that action item to go to Adam and say those words. Elisa, if you want to write that down, and I'll
Yeah.
just say, hey, this came up and I just want to float this idea with you and see where it goes. And if there's more from it,
Yeah. And if you
I'll
could
bring it
also
back.
just kind of see what his long-term plans are for that manual, because
Absolutely.
it sounds like he's, just in my casual conversations with him, it sounds like he's doing away with it. And I would just hate to lose all that really good work when
Yeah.
we can put it to use somehow. So
Sorry, I just joined a little bit late, so I think I missed what that opening stuff you're talking about with working with Adam. What was that related to? The training documentation?
The manual for the SSE training has a lot of like examples that start you out really small and build on it so that it gets you all the way to like an execution module. And those are, I do think that we could harness some of that and pare it down into, put it into public view and then say, you know, if you're interested in more of this, you would take our training, but that we
Yeah.
could harness some of that. And if he's going to get rid of it, of course, I'd want to just take it over, but I don't think that's, I don't know that he means that specific piece. I think he means to broaden it and make it just better overall. But it goes back to like what we were talking about in the open hour, Derek, where we'd love to have them in a repost that we could also point to some of the images that they're using and just collaborate with them internally more in a repo style.
That's the exact that's exactly kind of what I want to. I haven't had a meeting with him in a while, and I know he had been looking at how he was going to provide training material, but he doesn't have a background in like a Docs as code approach. So I wanted to make sure that if he uses a different platform, we somehow are able to, that whatever platform he is using or providing this content on or developing the content on, that it is reusable still. Because you know,
Absolutely.
right, worst case scenario is that we migrate away from the existing, whatever existing approach that we're using to generate those training manuals, to one that's incredibly difficult to try to I don't know, like if someone, you know, depending on what learning management system you're using out there, it becomes kind of this proprietary all inside that console system that is hard to pull stuff out of and be able to use anywhere else. And so,
Yep.
and if he's deprecating old content, which we are converting into PDFs that they provide to people who attend training, then we should at least figure out where the source for all that stuff is. And if he's redoing docs, we could at least take all the older, that source, that older material, and somehow make it, I almost feel like we'd want it, if we could, depending on whatever he's doing with the data, of course, I want to see how much of this we can make as publicly available as possible, because it is the one huge piece we're missing in our public documentation. We have like, here's getting started, the very, very basic steps. And then we go, and here's the raw developer documentation.
Yes.
And there isn't this in between. And the only in between is like, well, yeah, if you attend our paid training, that'll be going through it in a boot camp fashion. And then you'll have a PDF to reference later, but then the PDF can get outdated. And now you don't have the newer documentation or any of that stuff because it's just not available. And then that means it's not searchable. And that means people who are wanting to implement these kind of things, and it's hard for them to figure out. So
I'd be interested to know more about what he is doing. And I don't know if that's, I mean, I can start the conversation with him, and I think that we could probably start it in our internal Slack so that we could all see it initially, and then if we can move it to the community Slack, we will. And I'm just not sure at the moment much more than that particular piece of action that we can take, but I think that it's a really great idea, and I would love to collaborate with him more, and I hope that he's at least open to, you know, a docs as code approach, because I think that it would help him and it would help us in a way that's kind of uncanny. And so I hope that other people can see that benefit as well.
yeah, because if he needs, and maybe we should invite him to maybe a future working group meeting to just sit in on or kind of chat with us about some things, because I do want to, you know, depending on whatever his workflow is too, I'm a big tools guy. I love making tools and helping automate anything. So if he's like, well, this is the process I'm using and this is how I have to make it and do, and this is the format, I mean, I could always work with him to try to figure out what do the platforms provide feature wise that he's using, and then what can we do to make it as friction, you know, least amount of friction and as seamless as possible, to where that content that he's creating is reusable. Because then, I mean, the extra benefit of that is that if we go to use a different platform for training material in the future too, then it'd be easier to migrate. But I just worry that if it's one of those really painful platforms that the tooling could become a nightmare. But so we'll see. We'll see
Yeah.
what he's kind of creating.
Yeah, I'd love to have that conversation of kind of like, okay, so if that's what, you know, what are the requirements that you're looking for in a tool, or what is it, what's hindering you in this process? And Andre is also our process person too, and would love to dig into that with him a little bit, because I think that we haven't done that as much internally across teams. And I would like to open that up. And then that also helps us as we broaden what's happening on the open source project itself, to say, how can we harness this and use it with the community, because we want to also involve that piece as well. And so I think that it's a really good place to collaborate here in this work group. And I'll take that action to just mention this to Adam and invite him and let him know that it's available, and we'd love to have him attend, and that we'd love to talk about tools in the future if he's got a few minutes.
Oh, I bet he would appreciate that. I had a virtual donut coffee with him today, and he was talking about missing some of that kind of teaching and advising on how to help others learn. So I bet he'd love to join.
Yeah, and the really cool thing is that all the work that we're putting into GitLab, our GitLab projects, and our documentation, tooling, and standardization is getting more and more, it's getting closer and closer toward a more portable way of trying to roll out into multiple projects. So, you know, our theme was a big step, and is continuing to be developed a little bit more, so it's going to be reusable in any of our projects using Sphinx for documentation. And I've started to create some basic automation that can be used in any of our repositories for the painful thing that no one wants to do, which is just simply URL validation. One that can check everything from our RST files to the README to the contributor guide, that it just does it as far left in the pipeline as possible, because it just is hitting the source code. So I'm even thinking of turning it into a GitHub action that can be used by any open source projects as easily as possible, because if we could do that, well, our SALT docs are on GitHub, and GitHub actions for open source projects, as far as I've seen, are just free.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be kind of cool to then have something that, well, it can then be used by absolutely any open source project that includes URL links, especially things like awesome lists that all they are is a resource link README documentation, a document. So having that, I don't know, there's also like a GitHub Actions hackathon that seems to be going on right now. And so I'm like, oh, well, this could be a way to like just talk about that and potentially get it improved by community people who would want to make use of it. So, but
Yeah, absolutely. Love
anyway,
it.
yeah, the portable tooling, I think overall, and the cross pipeline automation that we have in GitLab, especially because our build docs for our open SALT, our build docs repository exists in GitLab. So it actually can make use, it does make use of GitLab CI already. And
right.
Yeah, so I mean that everything being able to be interconnected in that fashion, we're really laying the foundation for it, so that
Yes.
it's going to just get better and better as time moves on.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Very cool. I can have my camera on now. Finished eating. So I've got that action item for you, Sage. Does anybody want to take on any other action items? Is there anything from that you want to take on, Derek?
For what we were just talking about when it comes to
Yep,
collaborating with
just
Adam.
making sure.
Not that I can think of. I think if Sage follows up with them, then there might be some more follow-up there after, but
I'll let you know. For now, it's kind of open-ended, but
Yep, sounds good. I like it. Thanks for bringing it up, Andre. It's a good topic.
Yep, no problem.
are
All
we
right,
just
Derek.
following the agenda? Yeah.
or whatever Derek wants to do.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know, I posted the agenda in the chat. So
Yeah, totally. I'll take a look at it right now. I suppose I could simply just look at your Forks meeting notes to look at the 093. Here we go. So here's a link to the rendered README for this in progress.
oh, nice. Rendered is even better.
Yeah. Cool.
Get that?
So, oh yeah, so the first docs clinic tentatively scheduled for September 30th. It's, I could see this, because let's see. Yeah, so September 30th, and that's going to be, we're planning, if I remember right, it's like an all day thing, correct? Oh, no, wait, the clinic, sorry, I'm mixing the jam and the clinic.
I
So
was
the
like,
clinic
whoa, you're
is
gonna
like
do the
2
clinic all
hours.
day?
Oh God. No.
Like that's gonna be a real trooper on
Good.
that.
I mean, if you want to.
The Derek
No.
show for a day.
Oh, no.
And then again the next week.
So, so let's put in the dates of note for the docs clinic. Where it was like an hour, 2 hours, or something, right?
Yeah, you guys were gonna do
range.
a dry run through and kind of give us a time frame if it needs to be an hour, 2 hours, an hour and a half, whatever it needs to be.
Right. I did want to, and maybe I just need to meet with you on this, Sage, or something. I did want to just get a review of the contributor guide.
Yeah.
And as now that we talked about the NOx testing,
Hmm.
so that when I do the dry run, I'm kind of following some kind of format, being the format that we'd want to show people.
Yeah.
Can you
I
remind
like
me
that.
what we're gonna do in the first clinic?
So the clinic, my plan was to pretty much just go, here's the way that people can contribute docs to the project. And it's going to be going down just a few of the paths, being like, here's how you would open an issue about it. Here's how you would edit just an RST file of like a topic, like where they're located in a repositories compared to like where you see the published documentation. And then also, if it's a doc strings related thing, where that file stuff is located. Because right now it's just not, we need to have it automated, honestly, and built into the docs so that people could be, most online docs, for example, have a edit this page or something, like a
Right.
link, yeah, that could bring them there. Because right now people they'll look at the docs, then they have to go, okay, I want to edit this, but I don't know where the docs are hosted. So they might not know it's even hosted in the SALT repository. So now they have to go to the SALT repository. Now they go, where is that page even located? I don't know. If it's a topic, it's easier, but it's still difficult. And then
Well,
yeah.
There's a lot of steps involved, and I think sometimes we could make that a little bit easier. And some of them we do. We take you directly to the RST file on GitHub. There is a link there that we generate, but it's not always obvious if that's a doc string or if it's just a standalone RST file, or how that should actually be input. And so we kind of want to dig into those three main, like, if you see an issue for docs, this is what we want you to do. If you want to actually make an edit to something, that's not a doc string, but a doc, this is how you would go about doing that, and that's set up for that. And then the doc string and how you would know that.
Oh,
and it's
you're
sort of those three basic, and however long that takes, that's going to be the clinic. And that's kind of the setup also for when we do the day-long doc jam, to say, if you didn't attend this, here's the video on how to set that up, and kind of can refer to it and do a really shortened version of that and the intro to get people started, and then have those 3 tracks kind of running for that day, right?
Yep, and you're right, that edit on GitHub is actually a link on those docs pages. So when it's a topic RST, for example, it's really
Right.
easy to see it. And then
It's-
what I was going to
yeah.
do would be just a walkthrough on, okay, I want to make a change to this Kubernetes. Because I saw a document where the RST is just broken, like the RST formatting is broken. But
Yes.
it's in a doc string. And
Mhm.
so I was just going to, as part of that clinic, be like, okay, here's going through, making the, here's our fork branch to master method with this change to it. But the rest of it at the beginning is honestly going to be here are the easy button ways, because if you are going to edit on GitHub, you can just literally edit it in GitHub without ever having to go through the process of hey, bring it down locally for development purposes.
Right.
You
You could.
all these changes.
Hmm. Yeah. And so I
And
think that's going to be a good way to go.
I agree. And I just want to check that that's kosher, because I was told in the past I wasn't allowed to do it that way.
That you weren't allowed to do
Through
what way?
submit a change through GitHub. But so I think, is it that the line of where it is kosher and where it is not is for small changes, go ahead and use the GitHub interface. But if it's going to be more extensive changes, or if it's like to a module or something like that, you're going to have to
Yeah.
go the long route, right?
Yeah. And I think we need to call that out and make that very visible and succinct. And I don't think that it is, even for us internally as well as for people externally. And so we need to be really, really clear on when that's okay and when that's not. And I think that it's even fuzzy today. So I'd be interested to make that a more hard and fast rule, or at least say what it is and then iterate on that over time. Because I think that there are times when that is appropriate and we have accepted changes, but it's all over the map.
Would that go into one of the 5 contributor guides potentially, or?
Potentially, yes, I think that it should. Mhm.
Yeah, because I think it would be bad to deter people if well, for one, I think it'd be hard to tell. Like, let's say you had to go to an installation document. So there's some guidance on like installing on Debian or something. And let's say you go to that page and you edit it in GitHub. Unless there's something I don't know about that GitHub does that somehow breaks formatting or messes with things, I wouldn't see any problem with that. But I'm saying that with that caveat. Is there something maybe I don't know about?
Have we tested it?
Yes, actually.
And has
So
it
there's-
broken things? Or?
It depends on what it is and where it is in the code. So yes and
Gotcha.
no is the answer. So it depends. And that's why this gets really fuzzy.
Yeah.
And so I want to make it easy and more push button, but today I'm not sure that we can draw that line in the sand in an easy way, but I'd love to look at it. And this gives us an opportunity to do that. And then to say, we need to work here. This needs to be better here.
Well, maybe
Instead of a dependency. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe by encouraging them to try it. If it blows up, then we know where the line is. So, I mean.
Yeah, and I think some of that comes with, are you running Salt and building the docs to make a small change because you're making an edit? That's probably not going to happen, but it depends on where you're making that change and where that formatting change is living today and how that's being run. And because we have documentation in many, many places and we don't have a single source of truth today, it depends. So we need to, as we look at like the contributor guide and we're going to make a single source of truth, I think some of this is going to become more revealed on how we can draw that line in the sand to say, yes, you can use the GUI interface for making a small change to an RST file that's not a doc string in this way, and give a really clear example. But today I don't know that we have that, but I think we're close, if that makes sense.
The question I have is like, do we consider this to be a necessary piece that needs to be in place before the first docs clinic? Or
No,
can it wait?
I think it's going to become revealed as we get into the clinic and we go through that first iteration. Of like, how long is this going to take? And we kind of dig in with people and go, hey, that didn't work out, because it is going to be an iterative process. We're going to draw the line in the sand, then we're going to move it. And that's known that change is going to happen, right?
Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. I just wanted to get a sense of, so it sounds like the main thing we need to do is just run that internal clinic. So do we want to set a date for that and work out the logistics for that?
Yeah, we need to do that. Maybe
Yep.
I don't know. That should definitely be a task as a follow-up for right after this.
No, I say let's go ahead and like schedule it now. Then we'll be done with it. I think. But
Yeah,
I
to
guess
do like a dry
who's
run.
gonna do it to start out? Who's gonna participate in the dry run?
I would be
I
happy to
can be there.
participate. Mhm.
I would too.
Yeah, 'cause
I
I
can
think it'd
too.
be okay. Cool. Yeah, because I think if anyone else on the call want to participate in that, like Wayne or Gareth, to just be present, because if there's something, because really the feedback from doing the Docs Clinic dry run internally is also going to likely be then the notes of how we will improve our contributor guide.
Well, and also you might want to have somebody like Wayne or Tyler who knows Twitch. Because are we doing it on Twitch?
No, not internally. The internal, not the.
Okay, no worries.
And when
Yeah, and
we
the
do the clinic, I think we've got Twitch all worked out. And so it will just run. You know, it should be very, very simple and not something to
Okay.
troubleshoot.
Exactly. It's just a matter of when I set up the event in Zoom, enabling the stream to Twitch. That's
Okay.
been my blocker, is that there's not, now I don't have a place to post events, right? Because we don't have Bevy anymore. And so I need I don't know if I think I'm probably gonna have to just use Meetup or something, but somewhere the information about this event needs to live so that people can RSVP, just because that could be helpful for planning purposes. But with all the migration, we decided not to migrate the events page right now because there aren't that many in-person events. So
Yeah, I would say that we use something that we've got. So either a form, that is a simple form, RSVP to this form, or to use, there's some other things that we can use within the wiki. There's some other things that we can use within Slack. So Meetup, all those things that we already have access to. Pick
Yeah.
one and just run with it.
Yep, yeah. I think it's gonna go on Meetup because I need, my marketing hat goes on and I need a place that I can promote this. And as
Love
like
it.
marketing does these monthly newsletters now and they want our events in it. So it'll be great to have, hey, this Docs Jam's coming up. So I will get that posted in the next week. I just wanted to see if anybody had objections to it going on. Just the SALT Virtual Contributors Meetup page is where things are going to live right now.
Sounds good. Just as long as it's
Alright.
not on Facebook, I'm okay.
And I could
Love it.
cross-post it to Facebook.
Just kidding. I deleted
to
my
do-
Facebook this week, so
Oh.
Yay!
I know I felt so good.
Power!
I would cry if I deleted Facebook.
Oh, I'm with you. Go, Elisa. I think that
Love
I think that it would be good to put that on the calendar, though. I'm more
Mm.
free in the afternoons, but I will make time for this. So
Yeah, same.
Okay. All right. Cool. Then let's check.
Maybe next week.
Yeah, maybe next week, and then we could just make sure that, what was it, Elisa? Wait, who all wanted to be on that now? Take a second.
Lisa, Sage, Cassandra,
Derek.
Derek.
And
Then you could maybe invite a few optional attendees like Wayne or
Yeah.
something.
and I'll go through maybe one, maybe, and I'll have to, because I was just thinking about Pedro too. I'm gonna have to go through his blog post.
Yeah.
To just look at how he's using Knox and stuff. Yeah. Because I admittedly, in every contribution I've done, I've never ran Knox. I've always
I
just,
haven't either, actually.
yeah.
And next week is a short week because there is a U.S. holiday, so a lot of us are off. We're all off on Monday. So if that doesn't work out, I think the week of the 14th is still a really good time frame. So
How
I would
funny.
just do it early.
I'm glad you said that because I was like, why not Monday? Monday's a really good day to.
It's a holiday.
My schedule's
Pretty
open.
nice. Yep, I bet it is. So funny. Yeah, I think that's fine. Next week or the following week, the week of the 8th or the week of the 14th will work.
Yeah.
And
Sounds good.
My main request is not a Thursday.
yep, any day but Thursday. And I know on Friday we're all going to be fried, so probably early in the week. Derek, are you going to send that out, or do you want me to?
Or do you want to do it from, do you want me to set it up so that I can be on my Zoom with Twitch? Well, I don't
Well,
care about
this
Twitch,
was
but
just-
recording it.
Yeah, this
Yeah, this
Mine
will be
can record
internal.
too, so.
Okay, yeah. It needs to be somebody who can record it because I could see us wanting to refer to this.
Yeah, I'm happy to send that out if you want.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool,
for like
thank
a for a Tuesday or Wednesday, either next week or the week following.
Yep.
Right.
I'll look at schedules and do that.
Yeah, whatever the schedules where we all are
Yep.
aligned.
Sounds good.
And if you need, I can move things around in my schedule if I happen to be the blocker on the
Okay,
schedule.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
Yeah,
same.
I'll-
Unless it's a meeting that Sage scheduled.
Cool.
You know, stand-ups and planning meetings.
Yeah.
And open hour. Those are about the only things that I absolutely cannot move.
Sure.
But yeah.
And I have a handful of meetings that will be on my calendar that say optional that
Okay.
you know that I could just navigate around to.
Yeah, awesome. If people have their schedules up to date and you have your working hours in your calendar, that helps me too. So then I can just know that like you're off at this time. And for me, where I'm West Coast, I'm like, oh right, yeah,
Working hours?
that's what time that is. Yeah, there's a default that'll set it, I think, to 8 to 5 your local time. And you can actually go in and adjust that in the settings in your calendar. And it's really helpful to see that it'll show me like a little moon that it's outside of your working hours. And so then I know not to schedule.
I
Yeah.
see that on most calendars sometimes.
Yep.
I just feel like I don't have working hours because log on and I'm here all day.
keep working on mountain time and
I do tend to work on probably somewhere between Central and Mountain Time, which agrees very
Yeah.
well with my not a morning person self.
well, hey, it works out then.
Yeah, no meetings before 10 a.m. Count me in.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think that's good for that agenda item.
Yeah, and I for some reason just lost track of these meeting notes because I have too many tabs open. Okay, here we go. All right, so Docs Clinic we talked about, Docs Jam. Well, I guess the Docs Clinic stuff will ultimately inform pieces of that. But do we need to have a internal meeting sometime scheduled that will be dedicated to outlining the planning around how the Docs Jam is going to be run?
I mean, maybe a brief, 15, 20 minutes, but I don't think it needs to be a big thing, but maybe just, a few days before a meet and talk about.
Well, so I'm just curious what pieces we're still missing. We're going to have that introductory video, and we've got the introductory document. And do we have it scheduled on the calendar yet? It's fine if it's not. I was just wondering. But
Nope, I'll get that up.
yeah, no worries. No worries. So we just need the calendar piece, the agenda piece, the Docs Clinic video piece, which I think most of those are almost all in place or very easy to do. But I think the only thing we're missing is who's going to be scheduled to be in which Zoom room at which time. Is that the piece we're missing?
Oh, yeah. That is a good point. And we don't have to, I did that for the PR Jam. I did that really close to the date because of schedules changing and stuff, but it felt like,
That's a really good point.
yeah. It felt like one of those logic puzzles. Like if you ever did logic puzzles as a kid, that's what it felt
Totally.
like. Trying to
so funny.
schedule.
That's really funny.
Yeah. We can meet at this time and this time, but not this time. And but
I love those logic puzzles, so that sounds fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take care of that stuff. That's all.
Okay, no worries.
Easy.
I'll
What'll
mark that.
happen? Yeah. What'll happen is when it gets closer, I will just post a message and say, hey, what times is everybody available to support this? I think we decided we're doing 8 to 4 Mountain, 8 to 5 Mountain, something like that.
We put 8 to 5 Mountain, yeah.
Okay. Which was a little early for our California people, but also that's what time conferences start. So.
So like at the Port Jam, we had like a special speaker from Tom and things like that, or like kickoff things. Do we want to do any kind of kickoff or wrap up or anything? Just, we don't have to, I'm just putting it on the table.
I am in favor of ceremony.
Nice. What do you think would be good for this particular one? Anything that would be interesting to our crowd that would maybe draw in some people?
So you guys went to a conference recently, Write the Docs in Portland, is that right?
Yeah.
I think having you guys talk about things that you'd learned there would be a real treat, actually.
That's a really good
Maybe.
idea.
One thing that could also be good, like if we could like have it kind of an inspiring speech about how documentation is so important to open source, because it is. I think that could be really cool. And I might be able to get a special speaker for that. So Derek and I contribute to a different open source community, and we have some pretty good connections with Erin. I don't know her last name, Erin's last name, but she is in charge of open source advocacy and the docs side of it at Google. And she runs the season of docs and things like that. It might be worth seeing if she might be available to just give like a quick little 15-20 minute kickoff, like why docs matter to open source or something like that. So
If she's like a head of community or in any capacity a developer relations person, I would be very surprised if she said, no, I will not speak in front of a group of people. Because
Right.
it's part of what we do. I like that idea too. I like the idea of bringing somebody external.
yeah, I think it'd be nice. And like, I think, you know, I don't know what the rules for Google are, but I bet they'd be, like, she's spoken at other Write the Docs events, so I think she's able to speak at events. So I can see if she's available at that time. Were we talking about 8? She's on Pacific time, so 8 might be too early for her.
Maybe we could do a lunchtime,
Mhm.
and or an end of.
Yeah.
All of those are options. I think that'd be
Yeah.
really great.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, it
I'll
could
see
even be
what
what
she likes.
what timing is
Uh-huh.
best for her, because again, if she's an experienced and regular speaker, she's probably used to being up at all sorts of hours to do this stuff.
It's true, and I have to say she's very charming. She has such a funny sense of humor. So anyway, so I'll see if she's interested, and we'll go from there.
Awesome, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, cool. Then I think that make sure to get those notes down. I know, so we got the first documentation clinic stuff kind of all talked about there. From everything that I see listed, we've kind of gone over. I do see one item there that says Cassandra will formalize the documentation for running various types of community events. Is that something that we just talked about, or is that too generic of a line?
Didn't we just say that like that's maybe going to come out of that first dry run with the docs clinic? Is that what we said? Maybe.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those ongoing things that like I've worked on and off since I started here, is just how to run an event. So it's probably something that I think realistically, since I will be helping run this, it might not necessarily be needed for this particular event, but I don't want to be single source of failure. And so maybe I just need to prioritize for the next release actually writing how to run event guides for all of us. But yeah, it's there. It's just one of those things that's like when you get a minute, and then we don't know when you get a minute goes. And
it's that's definitely like an organically always evolving thing. So not necessarily like a task of one and done kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely have a template, gosh, from years ago. I have some like template documents on that I've used for like, some of it would translate, some wouldn't, because it was about how to like host and organize physical meetups in an office, but some of that stuff can be reused.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plagiarize my previous work.
Yeah, we can even start really simple since everything is online, kind of a basic. And I think that now that we have, this kind of came out of the So how do I integrate with Twitch, and how do I do all the things, and what are all the places that I should be communicating this, and kind of that general sense of an event. And a lot of that is kind of worked out in the last couple of, just days that we've simplified some things.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not as big as we thought it was going to be.
Well, and it's
But
one
it
of those
is what it is.
things. Yeah. Well, and like event planning is one of those things that like lives in my head, and it's just like I know it, but I forget not everybody knows that stuff. It's a piece of knowledge that needs to not just live in my head.
Yeah, I would say start it in Confluence, and then if we can even make it more public than that, we could do that and do a blog post or even on a wiki page somewhere or something. I think that would be really great.
I have been using my community management Confluence page a little bit more, so.
God, I wish I would have written it down, but while we were in conversation, I don't know, for the past, I don't know how long, I was thinking like, oh, this is something not on the agenda we really need to talk about, but now I totally don't know what it is because I did not write it down. So I hope it comes back at some point.
It probably will.
Yeah. All the things we were just talking about, the Docs Clinic, internal run. Yeah, I don't know. I'll just move on. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. Anything else about the clinic stuff before we move on to the other items in the agenda?
I think we're in a good place with the Docs Jam and the Docs Clinic, seems like. So
And we'll just watch for the invite on the dry run.
Oh, I remember now. We don't have on there under like the Docs Jam planning anything Hacktoberfest related. I don't know if we were going to want to make sure that the contributor guide was improved a bit before the Docs Jam, and if we were going to flag certain good first issues with the Hacktoberfest tag or not, or I don't even know what the process is for that if we wanted to do anything.
Yeah, that's actually something that we do need to talk about. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that those things they don't have to happen in that order, although ideally they would. And so then we could flag issues in that way. And I do have a few that are already tagged with good first issue. And so if we need to have more than that, that's great. We could do so. And I would, I don't know that we're going to be involved as much in the Hacktoberfest as we want to be, but I would like to, because I think that that's it'd be a good intro to us to kind of start out. But it's going on now, isn't it?
I can't remember this. I don't think it's not just
not till October?
Yeah.
Or is it
Is it
starting
not
now?
till-
It doesn't go. Hacktoberfest starts in October. September is Preptember.
Preptember, gotcha.
I think is what they call
I
it.
like that.
So it's for prepping to find, good places to contribute for Hacktoberfest.
Cool. Then
Yes.
that does make me think then, if we're talking about good first issues, that would be good ones for Docs for Hacktoberfest. Technically, this can cross over to really any of the good first issues that seem like good Hacktoberfest issues, even if they're not Docs related, just to have labeled, because I think because that's how people are currently searching for. That's how they would be searching for Hacktoberfest eligible points or whatever, right? Is that they'd be looking for tags, and that could include people who are already contributing to SALT, who, I don't know, might see a good first issue that has a Hacktoberfest tag. I don't know what thoughts are on that.
Yeah, and that brings me to a point that I hadn't thought of until you mentioned it. Like, we have good first issue, and that it's probably just a good first issue in general. Like, we haven't necessarily said this is a good Docs first issue or this is a good Doc string first issue. You would have to pair it with another label to do so, I think, right now. And I'm not sure if that's how we want to do it, but that's currently what it is. So I just point that out. And but all of those that are labeled that way could get potentially pulled in. But I don't know what the process is for that. Like, do we need to, is it just that we're open source so we become a part of it, or do we need to like submit something to say we want to be a part of it? How does that work?
They do have maintainers guidance.
Okay.
Here, I'll put it in the chat. Because I think what the main thing they go is have the contributing file with your contributing guidelines, apply the Hacktoberfest label to issues that are ready for any contributors to work on, and choose issues that have a well-defined scope and are self-contained, and that you have to have a code of conduct. So we have a code of conduct. We have a contributing MD file. Granted, that becomes a rabbit hole once they land there, but then we also have several issues with the good first issue label.
Do we want to assign any action items to do anything?
There's kind of a lot of things here. I think that we probably need to go through some of this. Maybe we could just, either we could pick through it, or we could say, everybody go pick some things to look at, and
Yeah,
and
I like
let's
that.
bring it back. Yeah, I think
Would
that would be
you?
good.
Oh, you did just give the link. I will include that in the meeting notes, and then we can just kind of all have an action item to become a little bit more familiar with what it would take to participate and think through those kind of things before next working group. Cool.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, let's do that. Because some of us will be drawn to other things, and if we're missing anything, we'll just follow up there.
Oh, I didn't think to message Alan on whether he knows that this meeting's going on right now.
Yeah, we can maybe table his stuff for later.
Yeah, because he was gonna look at the GitHub API stuff a little bit more, so we can move on from that. I think that though, outside of his look at the Docs Hub content with hitting the API like that, I think outside of that, I don't know, are there other things people want to talk about who are present right now that we haven't talked about yet, or that we have talked about but have more input on or thoughts on?
So on the topic, I was actually hoping Ellen was going to be here. We have the ability to transfer issues. It's okay. I've used it a lot more with when the enterprise team and their repos were in GitHub. I don't love it. It is an option. There's some things I don't, there's some metadata that doesn't come over that makes me not love it, because it has to be done individually instead of done in a sweeping, instead of hitting the API and saying, go grab everything with this label, or go, get these issues or whatever. And I actually wonder if we wanted to talk about just forcing people to go to Docs Hub to submit an issue, or to a single place to put issues that are singularly for these things, and just open that conversation up. And maybe we need to have him here for that, and that's fine if we need to table that.
Well, we can't. I know that so like you said, there's the problem of the metadata. There's also the problem that when people go to a repository that they know houses something, they're going to be like, have other people run into this issue, and they'll generally search that repository. But then if the issues are all existing somewhere else, now the searchability is lost right there. It's completely different than any other open source project they've contributed to as a workflow and process. Of course, you'd be able to make it easy with the open issue, because you pointed out before, when you open a new issue, you have a bunch of choices, and one of them could be like, open a docs issue here, and it could be a link to this repo for doing it. But from that searchability perspective, I I really don't like the idea of transferring tickets, because we also then run into the problem of the open source repos that exist in GitLab. And now you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to have to create tooling to automatically duplicate it over into the Docs Hub GitHub issue list or something. So it gets way too messy. And I would rather that docs specific to a project exist specifically in their repo.
Okay.
Rather than being transferred, unless other people have different ideas kind of around that.
So my question is, as we looked at moving, you know, anything that wasn't a doc string, that was a standalone, you know, RST file or MD file into a different repo, the same thing would occur. So is that not where we're going? And for that reason? And maybe, I don't know, you guys will have to tell me. And I think that whatever our structure is going to be, that will help us to then, you know, narrow how we're going to direct people. But I wonder if we're putting all this automation in place, or we're putting in like transferring, you know, singularly or hitting the API, when we could just direct users exactly where they need to go. And maybe that is just in the Salt repo, and maybe it's in a Docs Hub repo, and maybe it's simpler than putting a bunch of tooling around a problem that shouldn't exist. That we just need to say this is the process and put it in the README, or just put it in Salt, right? You guys will have to tell me about that.
Yeah, because I've been thinking about this a lot, that I understand. I've been back and forth, I guess, on how the strategy and yeah, I guess this will be more a conversation to also involve Alan to hear his thoughts on it. But the issue, yeah, like you said, I really think it's just down to two, well, I guess three separate paths. One is that all the issues are just made in their appropriate repositories, and then they have a documentation label. And then in the Docs Hub, we could just simply have a list of links that are automatically doing a documentation filter to those repos, so that you could be like, click, go to this repo, and you're now looking at all the documentation labeled issues. Cool. And now you're not doing any transferring, and you're not having to make a bunch of custom tooling that could take a lot of time and maintenance and upkeep to work on synchronizing issues across multiple repos and stuff. And then having to also then loop in GitLab, because that'd be the natural next step, is going on. We have all this working now. Let's get GitLab to do it all. And I don't even know what a timeline around that on free time could even look like. So I like the idea of having mainly like a catalog of all the open source repos of SaltStack, auto-filtered with documentation labels, maybe in a table or something. Because then the issues could just be purely about the meta aspect of documentation. Because maybe it's like, so if you had a redirect from OpenSalt repo and for opening an issue, because if it's like a feature of documentation, because that feature of documentation could be specifically theme related. You know, it might not be just OpenSalt related. It could be how we're organizing docs in general. It could be all these other things. And I kind of like Docs Hub being about that, like those concepts. But again, this is me thinking out loud about all the problems of the way things have been trying to be implemented. Because right now we have an ocean of tickets that are out of sync that were moved over to Docs Hub or copied over into Docs Hub that I don't think any of us are looking at. I don't think anyone's looking at. And so I don't know.
True.
What everyone's thoughts are on all of those thoughts.
So if we take a step back, what we're talking about is that we're going to have across two different version control systems, right? Eventually, so GitHub and GitLab, as well as across repositories. And so we're talking about something that's probably agnostic of those two tools that could then pull those things into a view. And so that's probably more like a project management tool. And there are open source, you know, like Track, there's some really, you know, SourceForge, there's some other things out there to use that we haven't brought into our project just yet, because we've, I think, traditionally been small enough to not use that. or maybe even some resistance to use something like that. But this may give us a reason to try something, because docs is a subset of salt. So it's huge because it's salt and it touches everything. But it would be smaller in that we could probably do a POC on something that is open source that we would think would meet our needs, whatever those needs are. We would need to define them pretty clearly to say that we want it to do this, this, and this. And part of that may be open source. And that would give us a way to also say, this is actually what our process should be for docs, and how we could make this a little bit better. And I would love to do that. I've wanted to actually do that since I started here 2.5 years ago. And so if we have a small group like this that would be interested in that, I would put together some, like a requirements file, and then start putting together some different open source tools that we could try, and how we could try them and make sure that they go across, OSs and whatever those requirements may be, and do that asynchronously with this group.
I'd be so on board with that, because yeah, that is exactly the thing we would need, would be something that because these are open source repos, they don't require some kind of private account auth against GitLab or GitHub in order to go, how can I access your private repos or something? And from an open source community perspective, that would be so great if it could be just like a project view of all documentation issues across a selected or all open source SaltStack repositories, because that is the main problem. And yeah, that would be way better than trying to monkey around with GitHub API issue copying, syncing, and then GitLab stuff if there was like an existing tool. Yeah, so I'm definitely on board with you on that.
So I apologize, like I was focusing on editing something out of the minutes. Can you capture for me what the decision is that we've made out of this? Like what we're gonna take away from this?
Yeah, I don't know that we've made a decision, but I guess we have. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. What we think we need is actually something that's separate from GitHub and GitLab, that is probably an open source sort of project management type of tool, that we could show, like, this is all the documentation issues across both version control systems and multiple repos. And we would want to do a POC, proof of concept on a few things, a few tools that would do that are probably integrated already, to use GitHub and GitLab's APIs to pull that data in, so we wouldn't have to do that on our own. But to probably put together first would be our requirements. What are the requirements that we're looking for in this tool? So it needs to be able to go across GitHub and GitLab, would probably be a good example. And it needs to be multi-repo, and we really want it to be open source. Those are probably our first 4 requirements that we're looking for. And I can put together something in the Docs Hub repo that shows that, probably just an MD file, and just start putting in some requirements that we think we want, and then we can review that next time.
Okay, so you're gonna Sage, you're taking on the action item to maybe put together a tentative list of requirements that we'll review in the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, because I've seen some open source projects using something like Trello, for example, being publicly viewable board, and they have integrations. I don't know how fine-grained their integrations can become with like GitLab and GitHub. And I mean, that's like an example of an item that would probably be part of that kind of like a research stage. And because yeah, like you said, having some other tool with that big overview would be amazing.
Yeah, and I've been looking into this a little, and I get distracted from it because it's never my first priority, but I think that it probably should be. Yeah. I'm gonna have to drop for another meeting, but
that's right. We're at time.
Excellent.
We're at time, and I think we went actually over everything. So cool.
Yay!
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Another working group done, and chat with you all later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you.